James was the kind of man you don't leave. Everyone loved him. My parents adored him. Our friends called him steady, mature, solid. He brought roses on anniversaries, always picked me up from the airport, and never forgot to ask if I'd eaten lunch on long work days. He wasn't loud. He wasn't flashy. He folded the laundry the right way. He paid bills on time. He kissed me on the forehead before bed. He was right on paper. And yet, night after night, I would lie awake next to him, wrapped in the silence of everything we didn't say. We had been married for 6 years, together for 8. I met him when I was 25 and tired of dating men who played guitar and never asked about my dreams. James didn't play guitar. He had a savings account, a 5-year plan, and a deep voice that made me feel like I could exhale. Back then that was enough, or so I thought. But slowly, quietly, the space between us grew. Not through anger, not through betrayal, but through something far more difficult to name. The absence of presence. He was always there, physically, but rarely truly with me. We would eat dinner together, him scrolling headlines on his phone, me recounting stories from work that floated into the void. Sometimes he nodded, sometimes he forgot to. I stopped asking if he was listening. I stopped telling him things that mattered. It felt like living next to a glass wall, clear, sturdy, and utterly impenetrable. At first, I blamed myself. I told myself I was too sensitive, that real love wasn't fireworks, it was groceries and bills and routine. That wanting more depth, more intimacy, more emotional resonance was childish, ungrateful. So I smiled. I planned vacations. I tried new recipes. I bought lingerie I never wore because the idea of seducing someone who didn't see me felt more humiliating than going to bed untouched. We stopped making love. Then we stopped talking about why. But when people asked, I still said, "We're doing well." Because how do you explain that you're slowly disappearing in a life that looks perfect? He never yelled at me. He never cheated. He never made me feel unsafe. He just made me feel like I could vanish and he wouldn't notice for days. There was a moment, about a year before everything fell apart, when I stood at the kitchen sink, rinsing dishes, and James walked by, kissed the top of my head, and said, "You're the best thing that ever happened to me." And I remember blinking back tears because in that moment, I didn't even feel like a thing. I felt like a habit, like muscle memory, like a shadow. And yet, I didn't say anything. Because what was I supposed to say? I'm dying inside, James. Not dramatically, not in flames, just slowly, in silence, and you don't even hear it. I don't think James was a bad man. In fact, that was part of the problem. He was good. Good in all the ways that matter to the outside world. Kind, reliable, honest. But never once did he ask what kept me up at night. Never once did he press pause, take my face in his hands and say, "Talk to me, really." I kept waiting for him to notice. He never did. And the longer I waited, the more invisible I became to him, to myself. Until one day, someone else saw me. And I wasn't ready for how much that would unravel everything I thought I was holding together. Simon wasn't supposed to be anything. He was just a new hire. Transferred in from another branch after a messy divorce, with dark-rimmed glasses and a voice that was always a little too quiet for meetings. The kind of guy who carried a hardcover novel in his work bag and made eye contact like he was trying to read something behind your words. We weren't paired on a project. We didn't have some dramatic workplace meet-cute. He just started showing up in small places, waiting for the elevator at the same time, standing beside me in the break room, making a comment about the stale donuts and the way our boss always used synergy incorrectly. At first, I didn't think anything of it. But then, one afternoon, I found myself lingering by the printer just to time my walk with his. That was the beginning. He never flirted, not at first. What he did was worse. He noticed. He noticed when I wore a different perfume, when I switched to oat milk in my coffee, when I was having a bad day even if I smiled through it. "Rough call?" he asked once, nodding toward the headset I'd just ripped off. I laughed. That obvious? Only to someone paying attention. That line stuck with me. Not because it was slick, but because it was true. No one had been paying attention to me in a long time, least of all James. The first time we had lunch together, it was raining. He offered to walk to the cafe 2 blocks down. I said I didn't mind getting wet. He handed me his umbrella anyway, and said, "Then you'll just be wet on your terms." That made me laugh. But something about the way he said it, that quiet, deliberate way, made my skin feel too tight, like I'd been wearing something all day I was only just now noticing didn't fit. We talked for 2 hours, about books, about our childhoods, about the things we missed from before we grew up and became these functional, exhausted adults. He told me he used to play the cello. I told him I used to paint. "Why'd you stop?" he asked. I paused. "Because no one ever asked to see it." He didn't respond, just looked at me like he was seeing it now. After that, we started sharing playlists. He sent me songs he said reminded him of rainy sidewalks and small rebellions. I sent him the ones that made my chest ache in a good way. One night, after a company dinner, he walked me to my car. It wasn't late. I wasn't drunk. The sky was clear and I was wearing heels I regretted. He said nothing when we reached my door. I turned to thank him, and then I just didn't. He kissed me, and I let him. It wasn't impulsive. It wasn't sudden. It was the softest unraveling of 1,000 quiet threads I didn't know were pulling apart. When I got home that night, I stood in the hallway of our house, looking at James's shoes by the door, his jacket folded neatly on the hook. The TV was on in the living room, some crime show he liked to fall asleep to. I walked into the bathroom and stared at my reflection. I looked the same, but I wasn't. Not anymore. Over the next few weeks, Simon and I tried to be careful, tried to be appropriate. But emotions don't care about schedules or ethics. They just exist, loud, demanding, unapologetic. We met for coffee on weekends. Sometimes I said I was running errands. Sometimes I didn't even offer a lie. It wasn't about sex, not mostly. It was about the way he looked at me and asked, "What are you afraid of?" And the way I answered. I wasn't afraid of getting caught. I was afraid of going back. Back to a version of myself that folded towels perfectly and smiled at office parties and didn't remember the last time someone asked how she really felt about anything. Simon didn't offer me escape. He offered me a mirror, and what I saw terrified me, but also made me feel alive. One afternoon, while sitting across from him at our usual cafe, he reached out and touched my wrist, gently, like he was checking for a pulse. "Do you still want to be with him?" he asked. I couldn't answer. Not because I didn't know, but because the truth felt like it would shatter everything I'd carefully arranged to keep surviving. Instead, I asked back, "Do you want to be with me?" He didn't answer either. And in that silence, something inside me cracked open. Not from pain, but from the realization that maybe this wasn't about either man. Maybe this was about me, and how long I'd been hiding in relationships that allowed me to disappear. And I wasn't ready to disappear again. I told him on a Tuesday, not because I had planned it, not because it felt strategic, but because I couldn't carry the silence anymore. Not after the way Simon touched my wrist like he was asking if I was still alive. James was making dinner. Stir-frying something with too much garlic, humming under his breath, wearing that navy t-shirt I always pretended not to notice, looked really good on him. I watched him for a full minute. The clean lines of his shoulders, the way he used the back of a wooden spoon to taste the sauce. And I thought, I love this man. And I am killing him by staying, so I said it, just like that. "James, I need to tell you something." He looked up, still stirring. "Okay, what's up?" "I've been seeing someone. I didn't plan it, but I let it happen." He stopped moving. The spoon dropped, so did his shoulders. The silence that followed wasn't angry, it wasn't even surprised. It was heavy, dense, like the moment just before a glass slips off the edge of a table. He didn't ask for a name, didn't ask how long, didn't shout or accuse or sob. He just walked over to the sink, washed his hands and leaned against the counter. Then finally, "Why?" 2 syllables. Not, "How could you?" Not, "Do you love him?" Just, "Why?" I swallowed, because I couldn't breathe anymore, because I stopped feeling like a person in this house, because I needed to remember who I was when someone actually looked at me. His jaw tightened, but he still didn't look at me. Was it just physical? No. That seemed to be the worst part. His shoulders tensed again, just barely. "You fell in love with him?" I hesitated. "I fell in love with the version of myself that existed when I was with him, and that's something I didn't recognize anymore in this marriage." He finally looked at me. His eyes weren't full of rage. They were full of something worse, emptiness. Like I'd punched through a wall and found no resistance on the other side. "I did everything right," he said softly. I never lied. I never hurt you. I built a life with you. I nodded. You did, but you built it with someone you never truly saw. That night he slept on the couch. Not because I asked him to. Not because he was punishing me. He just needed distance. I lay in our bed, wrapped in sheets that still smelled like our detergent, staring at the ceiling and wondering how I got here. I'd always thought betrayal would feel like fire. Loud, destructive, messy. But this wasn't fire, it was ice. Cold, silent, devastating in its stillness. The next morning he made coffee like he always did, handed me a cup without a word. I took it, hands shaking slightly. "Should we talk?" I asked. He sipped, then set his mug down. "I don't think there's anything left to say. James, no, I don't want the breakdown. I don't want the tears or the therapy or the apologies. I want space, and I want time, and maybe, eventually, I'll want closure. But right now, I just want silence." I nodded. And in that moment, I knew. I hadn't just broken his trust. I had broken his understanding of reality, and no amount of explaining could unshatter it. We spent the next week moving through the house like ghosts, trading polite nods, cleaning up after ourselves like polite roommates. He started coming home later. I stopped waiting up. We didn't fight. We didn't touch. We didn't even breathe at the same rhythm anymore. Then one Saturday morning, I came home from the grocery store and found an envelope on the kitchen table. Inside was a handwritten letter. It read, "I loved you every day, even when you stopped loving yourself, but I won't beg to be chosen. If you need someone else to feel real, then I hope you find her. But it won't be me anymore." James, I read it 3 times, then sat on the floor and cried into a bag of frozen peas. Not because he was cruel, but because he had finally stopped being gentle. And sometimes, kindness can feel like the deepest cut, when it becomes a goodbye. After James left, I gave myself 2 days. 2 days to cry, to not eat, to sleep under a pile of blankets that smelled like someone who no longer loved me. I let the silence fill the house, let the grief take its space. On the 3rd day, I put on jeans and mascara and texted Simon. "Me, do you have time to talk? I could use a coffee, or anything." He didn't respond right away. Hours passed. Long enough for me to rehearse every version of how it might go. Maybe he'd say he missed me too, that he'd been waiting. That everything could finally make sense? Or maybe he wouldn't. At 8:17 p.m., the reply came. "Simon, tomorrow, 5:30, same cafe." That was all. No, of course, just instructions. I didn't know it yet, but that was a warning. The next evening, I sat at our usual table in the corner, facing the window. I wore the sweater he once said made me look like early November. He arrived 6 minutes late, no apology, just nodded and sat down. There was a stiffness in him I hadn't seen before. He didn't lean forward, didn't smile. He ordered black coffee, didn't ask if I wanted anything. I waited. Finally I said, "I told James." His eyebrows lifted just slightly. "And?" He left. Simon nodded. Slowly, like he was still chewing the information. "So now what?" he asked. I hesitated. "I don't know. I guess I thought we could figure that out." He looked at me then. Not cruel, not cold, but clear. "Nina, I never asked you to do that." My chest tightened. "I didn't do it for you." "Didn't you?" he asked gently. Silence. He took a sip of his coffee. "I cared about you. I still do in some strange way. But I was never offering you a next chapter. We were 2 people in a pressure cooker. We found something beautiful in the wrong place." My throat burned. "So that's it? That was all this ever was?" "It wasn't nothing," he said, "but it wasn't what you wanted it to be." He set his cup down, not even half finished. "You're grieving. You think what we had was more than it was because it came at a cost. That doesn't make it sustainable." I looked away, blinking hard. I don't have anyone right now." He softened. "I know, and I'm sorry, but I'm not the person who can fill that space. And I think deep down, you already knew that." I nodded because I did, and that was the worst part. He walked me to my car, the same way he used to, same hands in his pockets, same long stride beside mine. When we reached the door, he didn't kiss me, didn't touch me, just said, "Take care of yourself," and walked away. I stood there for 5 minutes after he disappeared. Long enough for the air to chill, long enough for the tears to finally fall. Not for him. For the version of me that thought someone else could rescue her. The next few weeks were quiet. No texts, no calls, no one asking where I was or what I was thinking. I deleted my social media accounts, turned off my phone after 9 p.m. every night. I went to work, I came home, I cooked enough to eat, I walked more, and I started doing something I hadn't done in years. I started journaling. At first it was angry scribbles. Then it was grief. Then it was letters I'd never send, to James, to Simon, to the younger version of me who thought being chosen was the same as being seen. One day I wrote, "No one gets to be my oxygen anymore. I breathe on my own now." I underlined it twice. Then I folded the page and taped it to my fridge. I thought I would miss them both. And I did. But not in the way I expected. I didn't miss James's steadiness. I missed who I used to be when I thought steadiness was enough. I didn't miss Simon's intensity. I missed the mirror he held up to show me I was still alive. But mirrors can't hold you, and steadiness without intimacy is just quiet drowning. I needed something else. Something that didn't come from a man's attention or approval. I needed myself. The thing no one tells you about starting over is how painfully quiet it is. Not the kind of quiet that soothes, but the kind that reminds you there's no one waiting for you anymore. No good morning texts, no soft footsteps down the hallway, no humming from the kitchen while someone makes your coffee the wrong way but tries anyway. It's just silence. And your own voice, louder than it's ever been. At first I hated it, but eventually I learned to sit with it. And then, one day, I didn't flinch when it arrived. I welcomed it like a guest I had waited too long to receive. A month after my divorce was finalized, I moved to a new apartment. Small, sunlight heavy. The kind of place where you can hear the neighbor's dog bark and the mail slot rattle every afternoon at 3. I picked out every piece of furniture myself. No compromise. No. What do you think of this one? Just me, choosing softness and space and colors I never had the confidence to love before. I painted one wall mustard yellow. It clashed with nothing because there was no one to say it did. I found myself again in the quiet rituals, making tea slowly, watering the succulents on the windowsill, writing each night, not to be read, not to be shared, but to remember I still had something to say. Not about James, not about Simon, but about me. James never called. I didn't expect him to. The last words we exchanged were formal, legal, and signed in ink. But in them was a finality I respected. We both gave each other the only thing we had left, release. Simon sent one message. "I hope you're okay." I didn't reply, not because I was bitter, but because I was okay. And I didn't owe that peace to him. I owed it to myself. Sometimes people ask, "Do you regret it?" They want me to say yes, to show remorse, to express shame. But the truth is more complicated than that. I'm not proud of what I did, but I'm not sorry for waking up. I don't celebrate the betrayal, but I also don't mourn the illusion it shattered. Because the person I was before, quiet, complacent, erased behind titles like wife or good girl or safe bet, that person wasn't living. She was existing. She was surviving. She was starving for permission to matter. And now I matter. To me, I still think about the version of me that stayed quiet too long. The woman who whispered her needs so softly, even she stopped hearing them. I don't hate her. I grieve for her. And I promise her, every day, that I won't become her again. One rainy Sunday, I passed by the cafe where I used to meet Simon. I stopped for a moment. Not out of nostalgia, out of recognition. That place no longer held power over me. It was just a building now, with chipped chairs and overpriced lattes. And I was free. I don't have a dramatic ending to this story. There was no grand reconciliation, no true love waiting around the corner. No cinematic moment where someone chased me through an airport or showed up at my door in the rain. There was just me. Choosing, over and over again, to stay with myself, to hold my own hand, to whisper, even on the hard days, "You're still here," and that's enough. So no, I'm not proud, but I'm not sorry, because from the ashes of the life I burned, I built something true. Not perfect, not glamorous, but real and mine. Some days, healing feels boring. There are no grand epiphanies. No background music swelling at the right time. Just you. Making your own dinner. Folding your own laundry. Waking up in a bed that feels a little less lonely than it did the week before. People think rebuilding your life means climbing mountains. But sometimes, it's just making it through Monday without crying in the shower. Last week, I ran into an old coworker at the grocery store. Someone who knew me when I was still wearing my wedding ring and smiling too much at office potlucks. She looked surprised. "You look different," she said. I smiled. "I feel different." We talked briefly. I told her I'd moved, switched jobs, started writing again. She asked, half laughing, "So is it true what they say, that you had a midlife crisis and ran off with someone?" I tilted my head. "No, I had a midlife awakening and ran back to myself." She blinked. Then she said, "Good for you," and I meant it when I replied, "Yeah, it is." It's easy to villainize a woman who walks away, even easier when she leaves behind a good man and doesn't play the role of the guilty wife. But I've learned that guilt is a cage with velvet walls. Comfortable, quiet, but still a cage. I don't live there anymore. I live in truth now. Even when it's messy, even when it hurts, even when people talk, especially then. Because my life, this version, built not from shoulds but from choice, is the first one that feels like mine. I don't know what comes next. Maybe I'll fall in love again. Maybe I won't. Maybe I'll stay single forever and write a book about all the versions of myself I had to kill just to come alive. What I do know is this. I don't need to be rescued. Not anymore. I don't need someone to fill the silences. I've learned how to speak into them. And when I hear my voice now, clear, steady, unwavering, I finally believe it. I'm not proud. I'm not sorry. But I am here, and I'm not going anywhere.